मंच पर उपस्थित योगाचार्य ऐसा ही जिनका वर्णन करना चाहिए, ऐसे डॉक्टर नागेंद्र जी, श्री सूर्यानंद सरस्वती जी, श्रीमती साध्वी भगवती जी, श्री राजेश रविंद्रनाथ जी, और जिन्होंने इन सबको यहाँ पर उपस्थित किया है, ऐसे हम सबके और इस यूनाइटेड कॉन्शियसनेस के केंद्र में जिनका काम है, ऐसे डॉक्टर विक्रांत तोमर जी, और यहाँ पर उपस्थित सभी देवियों और सज्जनों। I thought I should begin my speech with Hindi because when you say and when you talk about united consciousness, of course, union, unifying is a process, but it starts with yourself. And in self, it is everything about Svabhasha, Svabhusha, Svabhav as well. And therefore, I thought I must begin my speech in Hindi. In English, they say there are no free lunches. And lunch we already have had. So you will have to bear with my speech at least for 10-15 minutes. I'm sure you will not mind. Of course, in Indian traditions, there are free lunches, especially in our temples. And as Gurumurti ji, who is right in front of me, has written a wonderful book on Annam Bahu Kurvati, which tells you about the Annadana tradition in Indian temples. I must recognize the presence of Gurumurti ji, Nivedita Bhide ji, and several others who are into the quest of spiritual peace at various places all over the globe. It's a humbling experience to be standing in front of you, and that too in the company of so many real stalwarts who are scholars as well and who have studied Indian philosophy in depth. And in front of them, to be speaking over here is really, something which requires a huge amount of courage. But then that reminds me of what Yudhishthira had said in his very famous dialogue, which comes as a part of the Yaksha Prashna and the answers given by Yudhishthira. Yaksha asked him as to how does one get knowledge. And then the obvious answer that comes from Yudhishthira was that one has to read, one has to acquire knowledge, one has to study. And then the question comes as to as to how one gets wisdom. And then Yudhishthira tells that it is by remaining in the company of wise people. I am doing the same. I am here to acquire wisdom by being in the company of so many wise, knowledgeable and talented people. And therefore, as I said, although this is a very humbling experience and it requires courage to be speaking in front of you, I am daring to say a few words because I am in your very protective and very supportive company. Thank you, Vikranji, for having me over here and for having organized this kind of a wonderful gathering. And I'm told that the main theme on which I should be reflecting upon is spiritual democracy. As we know, democracy is not just a system of governance, although in many parts it is looked at that only from that very narrow approach, but it is essentially a philosophy of human life. To equate democracy to processes like voting and elections or institutions like parliament and legislature is taking an extremely skewed approach and missing the very gravitas of the idea of democracy. Democracy is all about egalitarian values, equality of all human beings, protection of the voice and choice of every individual, rule of law, striking a balance between individuality and collectivism, idea of level playing field while rejecting any kind of monopolistic approach, complete disapproval of birth-based discrimination are some of the key elements of the idea of democracy as is a common knowledge. While addressing the virtual summit for democracy, co-hosted by the United States, Costa Rica, the Netherlands, South Korea, and Zambia, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi had wonderfully asserted, saying that India is indeed the mother of democracy by claiming that the idea of elected leaders was a common feature in ancient India long before the rest of the world. This contention contests the Western conception of Indian democracy as a pale imitation of Anglo-American system of governance. The problem essentially lies in the conception of democracy as a product of monumental structures that were built out of European ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity. However, this forced consensus has, by and large, restricted the context of the philosophy of democracy, whose foundational principles evolved much, much earlier in ancient India. Not only was the idea of democracy a part of society, but even some spiritual pieces of evidence do point to this. The Rig Veda, the oldest of the Hindu scriptures, speaks about Samadhyana, especially in hymn 191 of Mandala 10. Samadhyana means the collective consciousness, united consciousness of the people, and the rhyme and the hymn has the following words, which all of us know. Sangachadvam samvadadvam samvo manasi janatam deva bhagam yatha purve sanjanana upasate samano mantra samiti samani samanam manassah chittamesham samanam mantram abhi mantrayeva samanena voha visha juhomi samaniva akuti samana rudayaniva samanamastu vomano yatha va Sahasati. This translates to assemble, speak together. Let your minds be all of one accord. As ancient gods, unanimous, sit down to their appointed share. The place is common. Common is the assembly. Common is the mind. So be their thought united. A common purpose do I lay before you and worship with your general oblation. One and the same be your resolve and be your minds of one accord. United be the thoughts of all, that all may happily agree. I can go on and on, but I believe the crux of the whole thing is how we have stressed upon the importance of doing things together, collectively. The Veda also talks about how people should gather in their assemblies, which is Sangachadvam, and speak in one voice, which is Samvadadvam, and the union of minds, which is Sammana, of hearts, which is Samachitta, of policy, which is Samamantra, and hopes and aspirations, which Akuti. The democracy was, however, not just one of the imposition, but also one that depended on the inner unity. And there lies the importance of united consciousness of its citizens and their emotional and even spiritual integration. This is why I shall be speaking of spiritual democracy as well. But let me, first of all, also reflect upon how this democratic spirit is very much a part of the Indian spiritual traditions, Indian culture, and Indian society as well. We know that, generally speaking, democracy is identified by the structures. But even in the absence of structures, for example, when we had monarchy here in India, like in several parts of the globe, the consideration, the approach of looking at the very process of governance and the institution of government, although ruled by a king or a monarch, was very different. The idea that not just democratic polity, but the institution of government and the process of governance too must have a spiritual foundation was echoed by Sant Ramdas, when he rightly described Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj as Upabhoga Shunya Swami. Somebody who takes ownership, but no self-aggrandizement. In the context of modern polity, let me also bring it to your notice, we find the echo of this in the thinking of Gopal Krishna Gokhale, the guru of Mahatma Gandhi. He had emphasized the need for spiritualization of politics. Spiritualization of democracy entails rejection of mindless individualism and materialism. Through spiritualization, we can and should solve for the human race the problem of harmonizing and spiritualizing the impulses towards liberty, equality, and fraternity. And I'm here in Ujjaini, and this particular institution is named after great poet Kalidasa. And look what Kalidasa, the great poet of ancient India, writes: Prayen samagra vidhau gunanam paramukhi vishwasruja pravrutti, which means the nature of the Creator is not to give all virtues in their completeness. Not one, even the brightest and most talented of all, has all the virtues and qualities and intelligence that may help mankind attain optimum levels of existence. Therefore, in synergy, in harmony, and in working together is the key to progress of the entire humankind. This idea has been the cornerstone of the Indic civilization and forms the basis for a spirit of democracy, and of course, the foundation of which is in our spiritual democracy. As was rightly pointed out by Vikrantji, the cornerstone of the idea of spiritual democracy is Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. We never look at spiritual traditions from a my way or highway approach. We never talk about any kind of monopolistic approach. We believe all approaches are equally valid. And therefore, I think this particular democratic spirit also requires to be manifested as understood by the Indian traditions in multiple ways, in multiple spheres. This can happen in India, perhaps, because we see an element of divinity in every human being. Modern democracy gives right to vote because a particular person or persons are citizens of the country. But regardless whether one is a citizen or not, our thinking, our approach, our worldview tells that every individual has some element of divinity in him or her, and therefore equality is a given thing. All of us are equal because all of us have that element of divinity. When we talk about democracy, naturally all kinds of rights and duties related discourse also takes shape in one way or the other, and gender related issues also crop up. As I understand, the Indian model of delivering gender justice has been symbolized by Ardhanari Nateshwar. Because when we talk about Ardhanari Nateshwar, we appreciate that there is some element of masculinity in every female and some element of and also all our male also have that feminine element in them, and therefore if both the elements are there between, in a man and a woman, certainly the question of one-upmanship, who is better, who is greater, who is mightier, I think should not arise. Even in our families, and many of our foreign friends coming from abroad may not have perhaps appreciated this. Perhaps as a student of social science, what I understand, that in India, if the family system had survived, of course it's very difficult these days, but still, whatever, if we have tried to ensure that the family system survives, again, it is because of some kind of an element of democratic approach in our dealings with the grown-up young children in our country. Our scriptures tell us, Prapte tu shodasha varshe putra mitravat archaret, which means by the time a child, whether male or female, attains majority, the age of majority, he or she should be treated like a friend and not like a kid, not like a child. That, I believe, is also the appreciation of individual respect, individuality, but at the same time within the precincts of a family. We also know, in India, it has been a practice to talk about unity in diversity. But in fact, as we understand it is the unity of our diversity. Because our diversity is the diverse manifestation of our innate unity, as I understand, and therefore this factor requires to be understood when we talk about not just India, but the entire globe as well. And while I was giving some examples about how the balance is struck between individuality and collectivism, there are umpteen number of examples. For example, in our country, in India, in Indian traditions, there are not just uncles and aunts. There are mamera bhai, chachera bhai, there are chacha, mama, mami, and so on and so forth. So every relationship is regarded as a respectable relationship, and therefore there is a different nomenclature for that relationship. Likewise, in every month, there are a number of, in a calendar there are several days, but in particular month, a particular day is considered as sacred. If in one particular month, in Bhadrapada, for example, if there is a Chaturthi which is celebrated, in Shravana, it is the Panchami. Or in another month, it may be Shashti, or maybe Saptami, or maybe Ashtami. So every other day also is equally sacred. That is perhaps symbolically recognizing the importance of individual when that individual is a part of the whole, a part of the group, a part of many. So friends, if these kinds of elements are going to strengthen the idea of cultural and more importantly the spiritual democracy, I believe that simply a particular culture accepting spiritual democracy is not going to take us anywhere. Through united consciousness, our efforts should be aimed at making the entire globe, the entire global community appreciate the importance of spiritual democracy and adopting it in one way or the other. Because in a spiritual democratic setup, there is no place of one-upmanship. There is no place of superiority or inferiority. There is no place for increasing numbers. And if all these things everybody agrees, I believe the world will be a better place for all of us to live. Friends, the cornerstone of our journey towards spiritual democracy is ensuring equality of respect, equality of security, and equality of opportunity. If all these things we really resolve to ensure for every other spiritual tradition, I'm sure spiritual democracy will not just be a subject matter for seminars and conferences, but we can practically experience the element of democratic spirit in our spiritual transactions. Thank you very much.